The Jeffersons wasn't just a hit sitcom, it was a groundbreaking cultural moment that redefined representation on television. With sharp wit, unforgettable characters, and fearless social commentary, the show made history and moved audiences across generations. But while George and Weezy moved on up into TV legend, some of the beloved stars behind the laughter faced real-life struggles and heartbreaking farewells. In this tribute, we honor the lives and legacies of the actors from the Jeffersons who have passed away, paying respect to the talent, joy, and powerful voices they brought to the screen, and the loss felt far beyond the final curtain call. Sherman Alexander Hemsley was born on February 1, 1938, in South Philadelphia, a place of brick buildings and broken dreams. Raised by a single mother who worked long hours in a factory, Sherman learned early the sound of silence after midnight, when the heat went off and hunger sat like a guest at the dinner table. He found solace in performance, retreating into imaginary worlds while the real one offered little but noise and struggle. He joined the Air Force after high school, not out of patriotism but escape. Later, he took a job with the Postal Service by day and studied acting at night. It was in those quiet, windowless theaters that he found his voice, sarcastic, bold, unafraid to challenge anyone in the room. But his journey was slow and laced with rejection. His look didn't fit Hollywood's mold, and he was often told he was too intense, too loud, too black. Then came the Jeffersons, and with it, George Jefferson, a short-tempered, fast-talking businessman with a chip on his shoulder and no patience for pretense. Sherman played him not just as a character, but as a mirror. George was arrogant, proud, defensive, traits Sherman knew well because he wore them like armor in his own life. But unlike George, Sherman never married, never had children. His real home was a quiet, modest house in El Paso, where he lived alone, far from the bright lights he once bathed in. His personal life was a ghost town. Despite fame, Sherman shunned the limelight off-screen, often retreating into solitude. Rumors swirled, and he never bothered to correct them. Friends said he could go weeks without answering the phone. The man who made millions laugh was often alone in the echo of his own silence. Fame never cured the ache of distance, it only disguised it. In his final years, Sherman struggled with health issues and grew increasingly reclusive. On July 24, 2012, he died of superior vena cava syndrome at his home, aged 74. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $3 million. Money that spoke nothing of the emotional isolation he endured. Behind the swagger of George Jefferson was a man who never quite felt at home in the world he helped entertain. His laughter was real, but so was his loneliness. Isabel Sanford was born on August 29, 1917, in Harlem, New York, the youngest of 7 children in a world already stacked against her. Her mother, a stern but loving Baptist, did everything she could to shield Isabel from the pain of poverty and the dangers of the streets. But Isabel had a voice that wanted out, a voice that refused to be boxed into the silence of struggle. Her dream was the stage, though the world around her insisted it was only that, a dream. Her early years were marked by tragedy. Of her 6 siblings, only Isabel survived past childhood. She carried that grief quietly, like a hidden wound, and poured herself into acting. But even as she broke into theater, racism and sexism constantly reminded her of her place. Roles were scarce, and for every part she won, a dozen went to someone else, someone whiter, younger, safer. Yet she pressed forward, carrying herself with grace even when doors slammed in her face. When the Jeffersons premiered in 1975, Isabel was nearly 60. As Louise "Weezy" Jefferson, she became America's calm center, a woman of patience, warmth, and subtle strength, balancing George's fire with compassion. But what audiences didn't see was the weariness she brought to the role from her own life. Her marriage had ended in quiet heartbreak. Her husband left her alone with 3 children, and she never remarried. She knew what it was to smile for the world while nursing a private ache. Though she won an Emmy, the first African-American woman to do so for lead actress in a comedy, Hollywood never gave her another role as rich as Weezy. She spent years typecast, her talents boxed into a single part. The applause faded. Her appearances became fewer. She lived quietly, often alone, with dignity but also a quiet sadness, knowing her full range as an actress had never been fully seen. On July 9, 2004, Isabel Sanford passed away from natural causes in Los Angeles, aged 86. Her net worth at the time of her death was estimated at $3 million. The world remembered Weezy, the gentle anchor of a loud, complicated family, but few knew the strength it took for Isabel to carry her own broken family alone, off camera. Her life was not a sitcom. It was a story of survival, of grace under pressure, and of a woman who smiled not because she was happy, but because she knew someone out there needed her too. Zara Frances Cully was born on January 26, 1892, in Worcester, Massachusetts, into a world that never expected much from black women, and gave even less. Raised in the shadows of post-Reconstruction America, she learned to speak softly and carry dignity like armor. Her father was a preacher, her mother, a woman hardened by loss. From them, Zara inherited a quiet strength and a longing for expression that no societal barrier could silence. In the early 1900s, Zara found refuge in teaching and acting, becoming one of the earliest African-American drama instructors in Florida. But opportunity came slowly. She spent decades on the stage, largely ignored by the broader entertainment industry. Her life was a patchwork of perseverance, performing when she could, teaching when she had to, all while raising 4 children. Tragedy followed closely. 2 of her children died young, losses she never fully spoke of, losses that carved a quiet sorrow into her smile. Only in her 70s did she taste mainstream fame, when she was cast as the sharp-tongued Mother Jefferson on The Jeffersons. Her character was biting, funny, fiercely protective, a matriarch who spoke her mind and brooked no foolishness. But off-screen, Zara was fading. Struggling with health issues, particularly a lingering lung condition from years before, she pushed through scenes with admirable strength. Yet those close to her said she was often exhausted, her energy quickly spent, her laughter tinged with something wistful. She filmed her last scenes with grace, despite the pain. As the Jeffersons climbed in popularity, Zara's appearances became more infrequent. Her absence was quietly explained, but the truth was harder. She was dying, slowly, with the world finally beginning to recognize her, just as time was running out. On February 28, 1978, just a month after her 86th birthday, Zara Cully died of lung cancer in Los Angeles. Her estimated net worth at the time of death was modest, about $200,000. But what she left behind couldn't be measured in dollars. She left a legacy of endurance, of long-silenced voices finally heard. Her fame came late, her success too brief, but in those final years, Zara stood tall, not just as Mother Jefferson, but as a woman who had waited a lifetime to be seen. Michael Jonas Evans was born on November 3, 1949, in Salisbury, North Carolina, where the shadows of segregation loomed long over his childhood. His parents worked hard, his father as a dentist, his mother as a schoolteacher, but the world around them was not kind to ambition that came in black skin. Mike grew up smart, curious, and quietly rebellious, often scribbling ideas in notebooks while watching the streets outside swallow up dreams not lucky enough to escape. Determined to rise above, Mike became the first black student to study drama at UCLA. It was there that he auditioned for a role that would change his life. Lionel Jefferson, the confident, witty son of George and Louise Jefferson. On All in the Family and later The Jeffersons, Lionel was the bridge between generations and races, sharp yet compassionate, sarcastic yet hopeful. But even as Mike brought the character to life, he felt stifled behind the scenes. He longed to be more than a face. He wanted to write, to shape stories, not just speak them. He left The Jeffersons in its early seasons, disillusioned by the lack of creative control. Hollywood, however, was not welcoming. Though he co-created Good Times, one of the most iconic black sitcoms of the era, he was quickly overshadowed by producers and sidelined in decisions. The pain of being pushed out of something he helped build haunted him. Behind the scenes, Mike's frustration turned to quiet bitterness. The doors he had helped open now seemed to close in his face. Mike's later years were marked by retreat. He moved to California's Inland Empire, far from the cameras, where he lived a largely private life with his wife, Helena. Their marriage endured, but friends noted a persistent sadness in Mike, a man who had tasted promise early, only to be forgotten too soon. He was never comfortable in the limelight, yet his absence from it felt like an unspoken injustice. On December 14, 2006, Mike Evans died of throat cancer at the age of just 57. His net worth was estimated at $250,000 at the time of his passing, a sobering figure for someone who helped shape two of television's most important sitcoms. But more than money, what he lost was visibility. A voice once filled with wit and fire was gradually muted, until silence claimed him completely. Mike Evans never craved celebrity. He craved impact. And though Hollywood didn't always honor him, his imprint on television, quiet, resilient, and profoundly human, never fully disappeared. Roxy Albertha Roker was born on August 28, 1929, in Miami, Florida, but raised in Brooklyn, a place where jazz filled the air, yet dreams for young black girls often stopped at the stoop. Her father was a porter, her mother a social worker, and together they held their family together with dignity and sacrifice. Roxy grew up knowing the tension between pride and limitation, where intelligence was expected but rarely rewarded, especially in women who looked like her. She studied drama at Howard University and later at the Yale School of Drama, excelling despite the silent barriers all around her. By the time she was cast as Helen Willis on The Jeffersons, one half of one of television's first interracial couples, she had already known how radical visibility could be. But Helen's gentle charm masked the intensity of the woman who played her. Roxy was poised, elegant, and deeply aware of what it meant to carry such a role in a nation still wrestling with its racism. Off-screen, Roxy's life mirrored some of her character's quiet resilience, but also carried more pain than anyone suspected. Her marriage to television producer Cy Kravitz, a white man, was groundbreaking and difficult. Though it produced a son, Lenny Kravitz, the relationship unraveled over time. Cy was emotionally distant, often absent, and the toll on Roxy was deep. She smiled through scenes on set while privately grieving a love that was falling apart. She raised Lenny largely on her own, instilling in him a love of art, faith, and fierce independence. But motherhood could not shield her from disappointment. As her career slowed after The Jeffersons, roles became rare. She had been a trailblazer, but the industry, as it often does, moved on and forgot. The silence after fame can be cruel, and Roxy felt it acutely. In the 1990s, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She kept her illness mostly private, enduring treatment with the same grace she brought to everything in life. Yet the disease progressed. On December 2, 1995, Roxy Roker died at the age of 66 in Los Angeles. Her estimated net worth at the time of her death was around $1 million, a modest figure for someone who helped push television forward in ways few ever dared. Roxy never shouted. She never demanded to be seen. But in her quiet presence, in her deliberate kindness, there was a fire, one that burned softly, steadily, until the very end. Franklin Edward Cover was born on November 20, 1928, in Cleveland, Ohio, to a working-class family that prized education but offered little room for dreams. He was a quiet, studious child, often retreating into books and old radio dramas while the world outside dealt in noise and war. His father worked in manufacturing, his mother in silence, holding the family together with the force of her patience. Franklin learned early how to be still, how to listen, how to disappear. He studied classical literature before turning to acting, finding in the theater a kind of voice he didn't know he had. He was never flashy, never the star, but there was something grounding about him, something solid. That quality eventually landed him the role of Tom Willis on The Jeffersons, the kind, gentle white man married to a black woman in a television landscape not yet comfortable with that truth. He brought to the role warmth and awkwardness, a man fumbling toward understanding, reflecting a nation still unsure how to speak to itself. But Franklin never quite belonged in Hollywood. Off-screen, he lived modestly, shying away from press and fame. He struggled to find meaningful work after the Jeffersons, typecast by his well-meaning smile and affable manner. His career dimmed slowly. While others chased limelight, Franklin seemed content to fade, though those who knew him said he missed the work more than he let on. There was sadness in that retreat. An actor with more to give, quietly passed over. His personal life was quieter still. Married to Mary Bradford Stone for nearly 5 decades, theirs was a stable union, though distant in later years. He had children, but the demands of the industry and his long absences left emotional gaps that never quite closed. In interviews, he rarely spoke of them, preferring to keep the ache private. In his final years, Franklin battled heart disease, his health declining with little public notice. On February 5, 2006, he died at the age of 77 in Englewood, New Jersey. His net worth at the time of his death was estimated at $500,000. There was no spotlight waiting, no grand tribute. Just the quiet ending of a quiet man's life. Franklin Cover never demanded attention, never made noise, but in the stillness he left behind, there's something haunting. A man remembered more for who he stood beside on screen than for who he truly was. Yet in his silence, in his steadiness, he mattered more than anyone ever told him. Ned Werdimer was born on October 27, 1923, in Buffalo, New York, into a modest household shaped by the aftershocks of the First World War and the hardship of the Great Depression. His father worked long hours as a traveling salesman, and his mother, quiet, devout, kept the house running with stern grace. Ned, the youngest of 3, was often left alone to entertain himself, mimicking voices and dreaming of faraway stages while his home echoed with silence and scarcity. He served in the Navy during World War II, then attended Wharton School before choosing a different kind of stability, acting. It was a gamble that paid, though just barely. He took countless minor roles throughout the 50s and 60s, often uncredited, often overlooked. Then, in 1975, came the part that would define his life, Ralph Hart, the wisecracking, money-hungry doorman on the Jeffersons. He wasn't a lead, not even a central character, but audiences adored him. Ralph always had a scheme, a grin, and a handout. And Ned played him with a light touch that hinted at something more vulnerable beneath the smirk. But behind the smile, Ned struggled. He was a classically trained actor who found himself stuck in bit parts. After the Jeffersons, roles all but dried up. Typecast and aging, he quietly exited the industry that had never fully embraced him. Though he married late in life and remained devoted to his wife Skine Uku, they never had children. Friends described him as cheerful in public, but noticeably withdrawn when the crowds disappeared. Acting had been his entire identity, and when it was gone, he drifted. In his final years, Ned lived quietly in a retirement home in Burbank, his days punctuated more by memory than opportunity. In late 2012, he suffered a terrible fall in his apartment and was hospitalized with severe injuries. He never fully recovered. On January 2, 2013, he died at age 89 from complications related to his injuries. His net worth at the time of death was estimated at $500,000, an accumulation from decades of hard work in the margins. Ned Werdimer made people laugh as Ralph the doorman, always on the edge of someone else's story. But in real life, he often felt like he was waiting in the hallway too, knocking, smiling, hoping someone would open the door and let him in. Danny Wells was born Jack Westelman on April 7, 1941, in Montreal, Canada. He grew up the son of Jewish immigrants who bore the weight of post-war trauma and unfulfilled dreams. His home was filled with the quiet anxiety of survival, where art was considered luxury and feelings were to be tucked away. As a boy, Danny found refuge in mimicry and music, slipping into characters to escape the tension in the air. His smile came early, but so did the habit of hiding behind it. In the U.S., Danny found his calling in comedy and voice work. He had the timing, the charm, and the oddball charisma that made him unforgettable even in small parts. But it was the Jeffersons that etched him into television history. As Charlie the bartender, Danny served more than drinks. He was a steady presence in the chaos, the friend everyone forgot they needed. Yet while his character listened to others' troubles, Danny rarely shared his own. There was a loneliness beneath the lightness, a man always just outside the frame. Typecast after the Jeffersons, Danny never found a role quite as visible again. His most sustained success came in the unlikely form of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, where he voiced Luigi. To children, he was a hero. To the industry, he remained a quirky supporting player. The gap between those two realities wore on him. He kept working, guest spots, cartoons, stage work, but fame never felt stable. And when the phone didn't ring, the silence was sharp. He never married, never had children. Friends described him as sweet, funny, and deeply private. The laughs came easy, but the conversations never ran deep. In public, he seemed content. In private, he was often alone. There's a kind of sadness in being beloved but peripheral, known, but never truly seen. On November 28, 2013, while visiting Toronto, Danny Wells died in his sleep from causes that were never publicly disclosed. He was 72. His net worth at the time of death was estimated at $800,000. Not poor, not rich, just quietly in between like the life he led. Danny Wells was the man behind the bar, the voice behind the hero, the friend in the corner of the screen. And like so many who live in the background of other people's stories, his own remained largely untold, a soft, unseen ache beneath the applause. David Downing was born on July 21, 1943, in Harlem, New York, a place bursting with rhythm and ambition but burdened by poverty and racial injustice. He was a child of the civil rights era before it had a name, raised in a cramped apartment where voices were often hushed and dreams were discussed in whispers. His parents, both blue-collar workers, pushed him toward education and respectability, but David's heart gravitated toward the stage. It was the only place he felt heard. In the 1970s, David broke into television with a string of guest roles, most notably on The Jeffersons. Though his characters changed, neighbors, workers, strangers passing through, he always brought depth to every line, even if it was brief. But that was the tragedy of his career. He was always there, always excellent, and almost never remembered. A gifted actor, yet perennially cast as someone else's moment. Hollywood didn't know what to do with black men like David, subtle, introspective, unwilling to clown for attention. He took roles he could find, and filled the rest of his time with theater, where he felt more alive, more human. But the financial instability wore him down. The spotlight came in flickers, never long enough to feel its warmth. By the 1980s, the phone rang less often. His name faded from credits. He watched others rise, sometimes friends, sometimes actors with less talent but more luck, and the silence that followed left a deep wound. He never married, and he kept his personal life fiercely private. Those close to him say he struggled with depression in later years. Acting had been his identity, and without it, the world felt disjointed. He would occasionally take teaching jobs or community theater work, but he never again found a role that gave him a home. He lived modestly, far from the industry that had briefly touched him, then let him drift away. On November 1, 2017, David Downing died in Los Angeles at the age of 74. His death went largely unnoticed by the media, a footnote in an industry that had once barely acknowledged him. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was under $100,000, scarcely enough to mark a lifetime of work. David Downing wasn't a star, but he was a presence, steady, real, and unshakably human. He lived in the shadows of bigger names and brighter lights, but never lost his quiet dignity. And in those brief moments when the camera found him, he left something true behind. Which character from The Jeffersons, TV series 1975 to 1985, holds a special place in your heart? How does it make you feel knowing that some of the beloved cast members are no longer with us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you've been enjoying this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.